Welcome back to another episode of the Space Salvi Institute podcast. Today I'm with Marc Barnes, the editor of the new Polity magazine. It's great to have Marc on. I invited Marc on because Marc's had like a lot of great podcasts on AI, AI chat boxes, AI writing, AI books, everything, and also a bunch of good episodes on technology. But I particularly like your stuff also on some of the gender issues. But Mark, it's a pleasure having you on.
Bob, thanks so much for having me. It is good to be speaking with you, if through a screen.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's just delve right into that.
Please.
Let's just start with AI. I was rushing back literally because of the traffic in Krakow, and today I just spent a really frustrating day trying to figure out whether or not these essays that my students have submitted are AI generated. And it's
Yeah.
frustrating because it adds another layer of work, but also it's frustrating because it just takes all of the craftsmanship out in the process of learning how to write out of things. And I've actually come to the conclusion, at least I feel this way, that we're just done when we have to submit essays online. So I was listening to your talk with Andrew Willard Jones on the way home, and I thought, okay, well, I'd love to hear Mark's thoughts on this because this must be frustrating. Perhaps maybe even getting essays submitted to New Polity that clearly have the mark of AI, or I'm sure the the people submitting articles to the New Polity would never do that. But
Wouldn't dare.
yeah, wouldn't dare. But what are your thoughts on this?
Oh my. Well, there's certainly too many thoughts to really give. Uh, I think that people justify these sorts of actions to themselves in many different ways, but at the end of the day, I just take it as embarrassing for them and offensive to myself. Um, I find it a way of lying, a way of being duplicitous, a way of also having a kind of envy for another person's craft that's almost like become mechanized in your life. What I mean is, um, I think there's this expectation, and there's a lot of reasons for it, that everyone should be a really good writer. I don't think that's true. I think writing is actually a craft and a gift, like so many other things. And I think that envy is it's the emotion that we have, or it's a sin, but it's also the sorrow that we have for another person having a good, and we want to take it without the effort that they went through, or without the gifts that they just have been given. Um, and so it enables us to sort of fake um, having it, having that particular gift and that particular calling. And I think that's a really bad education for just living in the world generally, because it means that we become unable to accept our particular vocation. We become detached from the idea that we have a particular gift and a call to develop our habits in a certain way. And we lose that ability to thank God for the ways that we're idiots and the way that we're not good at something, which is such a gift in life, to say, oh, that is not an avenue that the Lord is calling me to serve him in his church and change the world into the kingdom of God. I can actually leave that one because someone great will take that up. Right? The Lord is not calling me to sing the propers at the Mass because I'm tone deaf. The Lord, and you see this all throughout the church, right? The Lord is not calling me to be a priest because I am a woman, right? But then when we have this very modern notion that every man is somehow an individual, and so has this, which sounds nice until you realize it means that he has to be everything unto himself. And the more that we inculcate ourselves with this individualism, the more that we then see any skill or craft as really being something that we could do and could be great at, and we refuse any greatness or any kind of anything that might exclude us from being great, at least theoretically being great in a particular field. And I think what AI does by giving us the illusion of a sort of general intelligence that we have access to is, it also feeds into the envy that we have as people trying to be individuals who kind of have everything within themselves and don't rely on this great diverse social body that we call ultimately the church. So I think I think the use of it, I mean, and look, maybe this sounds a little intense for just a fake essay being handed in, but I do think it's an anti-ecclesial sin to send in fake essays and to deceive
Hmm.
people in that way, because
Yeah.
it's a way of saying like there's no there's no difference. Difference is not important. I can access a skill. I can access something. I can appear as a certain kind of person that I'm not, and that this is fine. This is just like a banality. I don't think it
Yeah.
is. I think it's offensive. So,
And turning in you
yeah,
even
go ahead.
say giving your word. I mean, turning in an essay maybe is not to give one's word, but you're putting yourself forth in an essay, as you know, like as a writer. I mean, and you even commented on this in the discussion with Andrew Willard Jones that when you publish something, there's an act of vulnerability. You go public with that. So what you're going public with is like you said, I mean, it's duplicitous. It's not the real thing.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for the fact that in writing we separate ourselves at the same time as we express ourselves. Like the work takes on an objective form, which is why we can have works of authors we don't know, or we can have a sense of a you know the author not even being entirely responsible for his work, but he writes beyond what he knows, or he writes less than what he knows. There's a certain uh, I just think brilliance to writing in that regard. But that itself, that very phenomenon of being able to produce a work into the world and die in doing it, so that you no longer have control over it, that itself is a personal act and an act of you. Um, and I think that I just think it's the Pope said in his address concerning chatbots generally that but he so the phrase here, this is from his I have it here. This is from his message for the 60th World Day of Social Communications recently. He said that by simulating human voices and faces, wisdom and knowledge, consciousness and responsibility, empathy and friendship, the systems known as artificial intelligence not only interfere with information ecosystems, but also encroach upon the deepest level of communication, that of human relationships. I think that's really what it comes down to is the implication in being willing to fake your own personality, is that you're not involved in any relationship. You have a certain sovereign control over the whole thing, and the other person who receives your apparent word can be a dunce, can be fooled, can have the wool pulled over his eyes, um, because and so as you say the the it creates this extra labor for people who have to kind of figure out now what's real and what's fake.
Mhm.
But what I would say is it's not just like extra labor that is a consequence of the technology. It's like the whole world of writing and even the world of hearing words becomes suspect. Uh, you're no longer listening and reading in the same way. You're reading with the relationship now under suspicion. If relationship is under suspicion, it's not the same relationship anymore. It's a different way of relating to people, and it's a bad one. It's a bad way to relate to people. So
Let's talk about that because it seems like, with a lot of your critiques, there's a great interview, I think, the founder of Magisterium, not
yep.
more of a debate on, I mean, what's the exact title of that discussion? The it's
Uh,
pretty it has a pretty provocative title to it.
I mean
Um,
we titled it "Should we delete Catholic AI?" I think that's what we
okay.
described it as. And yeah, it was a little provocative, admittedly.
But it seems like at the heart of, your problem with a lot of these, Catholic AI chat boxes is that particularly when they're put in the context of like catechesis and explaining the faith, you know, there has to kind of be an I thou relationship that's at the core of that. And it's just fundamentally lacking in the context of talking to a chat box.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that uh I mean how to it's hard to know even where to start in a certain way, but the faith is um the faith is handed on, right? The meaning of tradition, tradere, is a handing on and a receiving. And this is essential to the church. I mean, in some ways, you can speak of the church and the tradition as synonyms. Like it is what we receive from others because it is what they receive from Christ. Um, and so while I think the church at the end of the day is like the soul of the world, and so I'm not saying that the church is simply some privileged place where certain rules apply. Rather, I'm saying that the church is the most intense and the most manifest symbol for the whole of reality in the world. What I think D.L. Schindler would call the heart of the world. Um,
Mhm.
and this so what I'm saying is what seems offensive here should I think n- not be an exclusive offense, but one that ripples out and helps to reveal what's offensive about you know having elderly people receive cures to their loneliness by getting free AI companions in their house, which is something that they're doing in New York City, or it should show us what's offensive about the growing normalcy of having AI companion relationships and erotic relationships. Uh, that sort of thing um, is, I think, most fully revealed when we look at what's wrong with faking catechesis, faking teaching within the church. Um, you know, we receive from people who have been touched by Christ. Like ultimately, we receive the faith from those who have been eyewitnesses to Christ, the apostles, and who have spread the good news of what happened to others, and so on in an unbroken chain. That once you have that same idea, and but now without a person who hands it on, without a person who articulates it, without a person who stands responsible for a particular uh, articulation of the truth of the faith, whatever it may be, however small a matter it may be, then I think you have essentially destroyed the very form of Christianity, while sort of retaining some of its content, right? Um, so for instance, if I'm speaking with a Catholic chatbot and it tells me something like Mary is the mother of God, right? What I have to realize about the reality of that situation is that no one believes that Mary is the mother of God. That there is and I'm the no one is a subject there, right? No one believes that Mary is the mother of God. No one preaches that Mary is the mother of God, right? No one says that Mary is the mother of God. And there's no one responsible then. There's no one to die for it in its articulation. Um, and I'm not saying it's like I don't think this is a particular doctrine of the church. It's just always struck me that words of that importance should be said by people willing to die for them. Um,
And that
so,
words maybe have to be connected to people because what is the word of, I mean, can you call it really a word? This is why I mean, first of all, AI, artificial intelligence, the intelligence part is maybe a misnomer, but also calling it large language models. Um, I understand we're dealing with text, but maybe there's another way of saying this because it seems like words have to, I mean, as you say, a word has to be connected to someone. Uh, I mean, I am maybe inferring what you're saying there, but um,
yeah, I
it
mean,
doesn't seem that, yeah, no one could say a word.
to be a word, it has to proceed from a person. And I think Catholics especially have a sort of doctrinal dog in that fight, because if you can have a word that's a word that doesn't proceed from a person, then it seems to me that the Trinity no longer I mean, the Trinity will always be a mystery. It never makes sense in a certain respect. But the way that we have received the mystery of the Trinity, of the three persons in one God, has been to understand Jesus Christ as the Word of the Father. And that makes sense to us, or that gives us a sort of place from which to receive that great mystery, precisely because we know that a word does proceed from a person. And so when what appears, what is made to appear as if it is proceeding from a person, is in fact a sort of probabilistic generation of signs that have been prearranged as a numerical field, then it seems to me that we don't have a word in the strict sense, or I guess at most you could say we have a an abuse of words or an abuse of language, now made into a I think quite convincingly fake person, or a fake language using fake one from whom words proceed. Um,
Yeah.
and I think knowing that it's just a machine doesn't change that. Doesn't change like the how it appears as something that speaks, as something that um, as some interior center which is hidden from which words come.
Hmm.
Um, so no, I think we have a lot more wrapped up in this question than um, many of the proponents of AI have really. In charity, I just presume they haven't thought of like that. Um, yeah, that's all I would say.
Yeah, I mean, would you say, because a lot of the proponents of, at least amongst some of the, more technologically inclined Catholics involved in catechesis will say, is that, well, they kind of give this like inevitable argument where, it's going to be used. Somebody else is going to be, in a way, articulating the faith. Why not we use these things and train them in a certain way to do it well?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it seems like when you say do it well, they that just might not be part of the AI thing. Um,
Yeah,
so the inevitability of it, I just don't know how strong of a argument that is.
yeah. I mean, it. I guess the first thing is just that it presumes the morality of it, because obviously we don't say that about immoral acts. No one says, well, people are gonna commit adultery, so we gotta get in there and commit it in a way that's really, really good. It's like, well, that's insane. You should not do that. And obviously, when faced with the idea of the inevitability of sin, what you're really talking about is the opportunity for martyrdom, for suffering. I mean, that goes without saying. I think everyone knows that. They're just um, unwilling to say that the act of deliberately speaking with a fake person, of designing machines to appear as persons that speak to you, that these things are somehow morally neutral. I mean, that is the presumption. That's the only reason you could make a an argument about inevitability, is if the question of morality was simply off the table. I don't think it is. I think it's firmly on the table. Um, the other thing is like, I don't know. Everything gets sold with predictions of inevitability. It's not like you're doing something new. You haven't had some
Yeah.
wild insight. It's like, yeah, the iPhone was sold with the prediction of its inevitability. uh, Predicting inevitability is a great way to uh, produce a self-fulfilling prophecy, because everyone then feels like they're missing out if they don't adopt it. Then everyone adopts it, and then hey, it was inevitable that it would be adopted. So
Yeah.
it just seems like it's falling for a really basic marketing trick more than anything else. And it also is unbecoming to Christians who are supposed to be more creative and brave than that. I mean, like if the Christian faith followed, and you know, you end up in a position after all the things you believed as a child and read, and all the all the all the predictions of your life being one directed towards sainthood, and in you saying something like, well, I've just got to do this because someone else is going to do it, then it seems to me like life itself has been degraded by a
Yeah.
technocratic paradigm, and then you should maybe consider changing the whole paradigm so that you can be happy and brave and creative once again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you know, sorry, you kind of set me off on this inevitability thing, because it it when do we what I'm always curious about is when do we say that a certain structure of the world is bad, and that and what we're witnessing is something that needs to on the one hand like be suffered and then on the other hand be cured or healed. I was thinking about this because I was reading about this, you know, um, this AI companion designed for the elderly, and I was listening or reading what I hope was a person writing about this the experience of these elderly people who are often living alone in their apartments in New York, and describing the great benefits. I mean, this is decreasing self-reported loneliness with massive scores. I mean, you're going like 84% of elderly people saying that it's producing a positive benefit in their life. You've got people saying like, I don't live alone anymore. I live with my AI companion. Um, and you could say, okay, well, look, I mean, obviously there's like a benefit here, and so what we have is a AI machine that has a certain inevitability to it, and but it is being deliberately designed and used in order to produce this obvious good thing. Like what could be wrong with this? Um, and one of the answers is that it's wrong because of the anesthetic effect it has on the existing situation of elderly isolation, alienation, and loneliness. Like once we find a technological fix whereby we no longer have to be guilty because we're not there, where we no longer have to ask radical questions about our society, which is why are elderly alone? What is it about us? What do we do with money? What do we do with our jobs such that at the end of life, the people who have most suffered for us are left completely on their own, to whom a robot is a healing and a cure, right? We no longer have to ask that question so long as we can just say, hey, loneliness is taken care of by this influx of capital and technique. Um, and this is true in a million ways. And I think that the AI companion, which every AI has a sort of capacity to be intrinsically by virtue of appearing as a person. Every AI chatbot has this ability intrinsically by virtue of being designed to appear as a person, is a way of de-radicalizing all of society,
Hmm.
because society is actually extremely lonely. It's actually in a place where people are more isolated from each other than ever before, in a way that's like frankly a unique experiment on the entire human race that we do not know the consequences of. Well, I guess AI is a sort of consequence of it, but
Well, they're
uh,
saying young people aren't having, I mean, preventing young people from having sex used to be the big problem, but now they're
yeah,
not even having sex anymore.
yeah. I mean, it's there is no measure of human socialness that is not in decline. Like it's silly to even pick one because you're picking one of a million. Like uh, joining clubs, having friends, having sex, having marriages, having brothers and sisters in your household, going outside, doing things, playing games that are social as opposed to individual. Well, like whatever, going out to eat, like all of them have been experiencing a drastic decline since essentially the 50s and 60s. And AI chatbots obviously come into a world, um, notably after the first, I think, explicit experiment in human alienation, which was in COVID-19, social distancing as a virtue and as a sort of necessary one for the saving of life. That was the sort of explicit, we should not be touching each other. We should not, obviously for reasons of fear of disease, etc. But like the entire regime and its propaganda became entirely in celebration of whether it wanted to or not, in celebration of a radical separation of each from the other. And then it's into that world that chatbots then all of a sudden start to heal all of these apparent wounds. It's like, oh, they're reducing loneliness. Oh, they're providing an erotic partner for someone who otherwise has no chance of ever receiving anything like loving attention from the other sex, something like that. And it's like, yeah, I guess that solves the problem. But what do you want? You want a world in which like the problems, like the genuine problems we have, are solved by further degradation.
Yeah.
It seems to me that's sort of
It,
what hell is like. Like hell is just this sort of infinite solving of human sin and its consequences, um, by power and division, and not by ever healing, right? Not by
Mhm.
ever turning around, repenting, doing something new. Like so.
Well, it seems like, maybe to put this kind of in Platonic terms, but it seems like it's an image of an image of an image of an image. And what really gets me riled up sometimes, though, is when you see these people engaging like philosophers of the past who may have even said, I'm actually really not so sure about the technology of writing itself. I'm thinking of Plato, and yet he writes dialogues. But as one of the member of your board, DC Schindler, writes, well, there's a good reason why he's writing in dialogue form, to be as close to the real as possible. And it just seems to me that even though you may say, hey, well, I'm having a conversation or even debate with a figure who's now dead, is closer to me or maybe more engaging and conversation like than just reading these texts where I'm reading possibly into they're interpreting it the wrong way. They're not there to defend themselves. But why don't we just bring it back? We just got all the data. It has mastered all of the text, anything that this person wrote. But it seems like that's still an even further image of an image of an image. And it almost seems to me, I mean, like instead of instead as DC Schindler uses the term like symbol and diabolical, it seems diabolical because it's furthering that progression. I'm almost going to sound too Platonic here, but downward, where it's just another.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just something, I mean, that kind of really gets me riled up when I'm starting to see people do this. Um, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the I think we should note that I don't know. There's writing, and the reason that Plato feared it was because he was worried people wouldn't know things, and wouldn't remember things truly, but
Hmm.
would sort of uh, give it over to a tablet, to a piece of paper, to
Yeah.
a book ultimately. And Schindler's point is like, yeah, that is a loss, right? That's not, you don't have to deny that. You don't have to, oh, Plato, you were so stupid. Like, no, that is obviously a loss. But to make an analogy to AI is a little bit, it's to move a little too fast, because what's lost in AI is the word proceeding from a person, at
Mm.
all. So on the one hand, you have a question of like, will we really know things, and will we really have a memory? And I think at the end of the day, it was a the technology of writing, did prove to be something that we could have a relationship with, that didn't degrade us. Like, and that's not the same thing when it comes to AI, where we're not talking about the person taking a um, sort of a present form versus having his effect, in writing. We're talking about the person being gone. It's almost like the distinction between it's like a qualitative versus a sort of quantitative distinction. Yeah, and then as far as the kind of progressing, image of an image, I think we should note that it's not actual, like AI writing, AI work, AI things are not actually that good. And what's really happening is that we're giving it a lot of trust, and so we're not being critical about whether it's actually good. So
Hmm.
for people that use AI chatbots, because they become stupider in doing so, they also become unable to judge their own work. which
Hmm.
is just to state the obvious because it's not their work. So they aren't in a position of knowledge of it and judgment over it. And you'll see this all the time where people will write things using chatbots, will argue with you online through chatbots, etc. And you have this experience of they don't know that what they said makes no sense. And part of the reason is because human beings are not actually lonely individuals. Like we're trusting social individuals. And so
Hmm.
when things seem powerful and true to us, and I don't know what percentage of it or what, how you would divide this, but a great portion of the resplendence of that thing appearing as true and appearing as powerful is actually because it's coming from someone else. Like there's a
Hmm.
reason why arguments from authority, despite being the weakest, are in fact the most often given. It's not because we're just pathetic and renouncing all of our ability to think, though of course that can happen. It's also because to rely on an authority, to have a word that comes that uh, you don't have to dive into the depths of your own sin and ignorance and pull up something that's full of doubt and contingency, but instead can receive something like a word in confidence and cite someone who said it and stand with them in a sort of society when you say, no, this person said that and I'm with him.
Yeah.
uh, that's a marvelous feature of the human intellect. I mean, really, at the end of the day, our thoughts are not so individual and unique. We are, this could get kind of cliched, right? We're standing on the shoulders of giants or whatever. Um, and I think that is one of the things that AI chatbots are parasitically accessing in our lives. Like we think they're giving us the truth, but what they're really, really giving us is the aesthetic of having a friend. What they're
Hmm.
really giving us is the feeling of confidence that comes with standing with someone as opposed to standing on your own. Because it's hard. It's hard to speak a word and be vulnerable to it just in and of yourself. I mean, that's really hard. Read any philosopher, and the degree to which they will. I mean, and maybe the modern period's a little different, where everyone's very interested in being individual and unique. But there's a sort of tradition of I don't know. Read someone like Aquinas, right? Like everything he
Yeah.
says one of the most brilliant thinkers in the world. But if you just read him sort of passingly, you would presume that he was just citing other people. Everything
Hmm.
he says is really something you can find in Aristotle, really something you can find in Augustine, really something that comes from this authority, that authority. Um, and again, when you are free of individualism and envy, which God bless us, none of us are, but to the degree that you're freed of individualism and its attendant envy, um, you can rejoice in just standing with others, right? And having a thought that isn't your own, but you're proud of it and it's true. But to the degree that we are possessed with it, I think we have this. We want it and hate it at the same time, right? We want all the power that comes with leaning on someone else's authority, but we hate to appear so weak, right?
Yeah.
And so the chatbot appears to save us on both fronts. It says here, I will give you something that comes not from you, but from something frankly just described as intelligence itself. So, I mean, it's harder to get more of an authoritative seal than that. Um, I will give this to you, but I will give it to you in a mode that you can pretend that it's really you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like
It's.
plagiarism becomes simultaneously effective and uh, what's the word? Moral or like morally neutral. So you're able to go about it. Uh, but the thing is, what you don't know, of course, is that your authority is stupid. Like it's full of error, and it only looks right to you because you are not thinking, and therefore, your it only gives you what you're capable of at that given moment. Like you're capable of looking at it and saying, "Oh yeah, that seems right," and then you publish it, but that's not how thinking works. Thinking works by saying, "Oh, I need to grow. I was wrong in this instance," and then you, well, actually, you tend to speak a lot less.
Yeah.
Eh,
Well, part of it, I mean, even going back to these essays I have to grade, and even with the corrections that I make, when you make a mistake and it's your mistake, you remember that and you
sure, yeah,
grow because of that. But here, it's like I could be grading something that, and correcting something that's not genuinely their work. There will be really no education that's a part of that. And then another aspect that's added onto this, sometimes what they'll students will do, I'm making students look really bad. They're not all this way, but some are. Um, but they'll take the grade that you've given and the suggestions that you make, and then they'll go on to all these other chat boxes or some AI that's specific for this type of essay. You, as a teacher, I mean, to be a teacher, that assumes that you have some authority in the subject that you're teaching, and that
Mm,
you could be a horrible judge of the essay, but nevertheless, there's still like a judgment that's given by someone that's part of it. So it's making this is why I'm saying it's making education very hard because I mean, in the past, they'd have to probably maybe go to somebody else and then say, "Can you evaluate this?" But right away, they'll give a detailed description of why a certain essay should get a certain mark and not
yeah.
yours.
Well, right. And of course, you can go to it and ask not whether it should, but how could you argue that it should get a better mark? Yeah, look, I don't often advocate for the death penalty for children, but it just seems tempting. Yeah, what are you gonna do about that? I mean, as a teacher myself, I have um, limited the degree to which I put that temptation in front of people by doing more on the spot writing. Um, so having like we're doing an exam next week, and I've given people um, the kind of categories of questions that I'm going to ask for short responses, short essay responses. Um, and then I'll give them all, a blue book and have a pencil, and then I'll write the question and start a timer, and then what they write is what they write. And you know, I think that that's a little thing that you can do, but it also
Yeah.
means lowering your expectation in a good way, and um, no longer judging the kind of craft that comes with uh, a editorial care over a piece, um, but instead judging it for what it is, which is like a first draft.
Mhm.
And I give the students the books that they're pulling from, and they can make the citations, but it's like I also am no longer going to judge them as stringently on like the formatting of their citations, like because that's it's not going to work. In a way, that's a relief because I'm really bad at formatting citations myself. So, uh,
Do you
but
see
yeah, I
this
think
like
yeah. Go ahead.
do a lot of the young people appreciate that? Because it seems to me that there's actually a desire amongst a lot of them to go back to these things like, writing out an essay by hand, or, whenever you show them a video, um, of say like some of these seed dance videos that are, or I think that's what you call it, videos that are coming out of like it's always Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt fighting about Jeffrey Epstein. These new videos that are coming out. They find these things and you say, oh well, Hollywood is cooked. They
Yeah,
find all this stuff really creepy. And
yeah,
so and also, like one student said, stupid. So, I mean, we had Michael Hamby on a couple months ago to talk about some of this stuff. And he said that, this actually might be good that it's happening this fast because it might force people to kind of see, like, all at once where this is all going and desire to go back to some things that may be considered like old-fashioned.
sure. Well, that's uncharacteristically optimistic of Michael Hamby. That's good to hear.
It is. We try to get some optimism out of him. And it
Well,
took an hour, but
yeah, there you go. Good job. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true. I think, oh man, our sort of technocratic elite don't think of themselves as old, but they're pretty old. I mean, they're like 30-year-old types, and they've lost their sense of irony. So, they can kind of straight face look at a camera and talk about how they're part of this great revolution and and it's so, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, and a fool doesn't know that he's a fool. That's part of it. There's not a lot of intelligence that belongs to youth as youth, but one thing that they do have is the ability to know when something is posing and fake and no longer worthy of basic esteem. You know, this is why high school is so vicious in some ways because the kind of connection that a young person who is an imitator, like by their nature, they're at this formative part where imitation is like the lifeblood of the whole economy. They know when like that when someone is you know not worthy of imitation anymore, and that can be really painful, and it can involve all the clicks and all of the popularity contests and all that. Um, but what we have is a kind of sort of older, like their bellies are just starting to show generation of people who have, because of the capital they have access to, just produce this ability to live in a fake world, and are then turning to young people and saying, "Here it is. Here's the fake world. Uh, aren't you hip? Don't you want to be cool?" And no, it's pathetic. It's like the lamest. It's like the lamest of possible offers. It's like everything that seems basically adventurous and good. Would you like to abort it early on for the sake of the constant rent of our devices and the outsourcing of every possible source of your own greatness for the sake of its imitation in and through a screen? Um, Again, kids don't know a lot, but they know that that's a bad deal, and they make fun of it. And it's funny because you know I think of this a lot, not just in terms of AI, but in terms of technology generally. If you meet a young person, I mean, they might be involved in it, but they know it's brain rot. Like they'll call it such. They'll shame each other for it, um, and they also despise their own habits. Whereas older people, like you know, sort of 45 years old and older, will unironically and without self critique adopt like doom scrolling as a habit, right? And that's where I really think there's a certain sadness because on the one hand you can make fun of a child and say, hey, like are you're really just scrolling through your feed until 2 a.m., like don't you want to be something great? But how do you say that to a 63-year-old who has an unironic appropriation of all this technology as just a tool that I can just utilize that will have no negative effects because I've already established my life, I'm already virtuous. I guess I'm thinking about this also because of the we solved loneliness because we gave old people a robot um, thing I just read. But I think it's actually much worse. It's like condemning people to a sort of unknowing hell at the end of their life. And whereas kids really have the irony to be able to resist it. I don't think that the older people at least naturally have that. I think they need that by a sort of special grace.
Mhm.
um, so anyways, that I'm not trying to be too hopeful. Like I think that the power of accumulated wealth in AI systems is obviously immense, um, and it really is something special to be able to resist it. Um, but I will say
Well,
I do see young people able to do it. Yeah.
well, let's talk a little bit about because I've been following New Polity over the years, and I'm always, fascinated by you guys, and you guys are the resistance in a way. Um,
How flattering.
and yeah, well, I mean, in a way, you're writing your magazines, the themes are always on the right stuff. You're having conversations other people aren't having. Um, and also I think it, genuinely really rooted in in the faith, but also not just trying to capitulate to, the flow or the inevitableism that we often hear today. So like I've also noticed, and I'm not sure if you're part of this, but you and I think one of your fellow editors, Jacob Imam, founded, was part of, or at least founding, the St. Joseph, the Worker College.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of these initiatives. I mean, because it seems like now with AI actually being, you said, it seems like it's developed to replace humans in so many ways. And now the talk is about the white collar jobs going because of different AI capacity. Um, which I wonder how much of that is hype as well. But you see people now turning to things like the trades. Um, and another guest that we hope to have on soon is Matthew Crawford. Um, I think you're a big fan of his work. And I have to say, I know envy is a sin, but I'm quite envious of what you guys are all doing there in Steubenville with St. Joseph the College. So what was kind of behind that? And also like all the stuff that you guys are, how did that come about? I'm just fascinated that you guys are going off a limb. What's happening in Steubenville is quite unique. I mean, I went there a couple of years ago with Richard DeClue, and we went to the what was it, Chesterton Cigar Shop. You guys are having live comedy. I just saw the guy, the Australian comedian, was on
Yeah.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
Not, it
James
was a Joe,
McCann.
yeah,
Ah,
not too
Bob,
long
thank
ago.
you. I did not realize I was trying to put it all together, and we were at James's show at Chesterton
Yeah,
Cigars together. Yes, that was a good show.
yeah.
That was great. He did a great job, despite the level of smoke in the air.
Yeah, I know. I think I had to throw my clothes out after that evening, um, but it
Fun.
just I'm always fascinated. Like, what is going on in Steubenville? It seems like,
Oh
and you hear
man.
about all these graduates who just want to stay, and you're like, Steubenville of all
Yeah.
places, like the place where the sun does not shine
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Ohio River Valley.
Oh man. Yeah, I can't answer that question. It's just it's too much. It's like asking about, you know, the kind of core of my life itself to ask about Steubenville. So I'll just say, yeah, the College of St. Joseph the Worker was begun with many motivations in mind. Dr. Jacob Imam, the president, I still remember. I don't know if it was the first conversation, but it began with his anger over the scam of higher education and the way that it produces a sort of cringing uh, weakness in the person by putting him in so much debt as a sort of way of launching off into life. And I that that debt that you take on in order to do college used to be a sort of gentleman's agreement that you would take on a lot of debt because you'd be able to get a good job with your degree. But then that increasingly is not the case anymore. So you end up with debt and insecurity in both ways. And so, well, there's many motivations. This is prior to AI having that kind of I mean, it was sort of talked about here and there, but it really didn't have any kind of real threatening presence in the world the way that it does now. But this idea of being yeah, basically um, scammed at the start of your adult life, I think was one of the big motivations. And then
Hmm.
a love of really building the world. I mean, there's a it's sort of a constant refrain with Dr. Imam, just that the building the kingdom of God is not just like a metaphor. The world is to be built in a way that's good and makes being good easier rather than harder. And so, trying to place people not just in um, the whole tradition of education, but at the same time trying to help them incorporate that kind of building with actual building um, just made a lot of sense from the beginning. Steubenville generally, I mean, it's I think a microcosm of a lot of things in a lot of places because it's somewhere where a lot of the promises of the world have failed. It's a post-industrial town in the Rust Belt. It has experienced a just total devastating reduction in population ever since its steel industry was sold out to China or sort of progressively sold out. Um, and so it faces in a really just immediate and obvious way the need for hope need for
Hmm.
creativity, the need for newness of life, and it doesn't have the same kind of obviously it has as much silliness as anywhere else, but it doesn't seem to have the same kind of hope in the world, the same kind of presumption that the next big thing for the world will also be the next big thing for the Ohio Valley. There is a cultural suspicion of that, and part of what that does is produce a yeah, maybe just nothing more than a place to hope in a way that's very different.
Hmm.
Um, so, for instance, I started a grocery store here, and that's what I do. Um, and it's a small grocery store, um, locally owned, sources local foods from local farmers, and employs locals to run the shop and to make food in the kitchen, and it runs off of local investors who have largely taken their money out of larger institutions, most notably the stock market, and put it into something real. And they're able to see its real effects, its real presence in their lives, as opposed to sort of an abstract investment that just produces a monetary return. So things like that are, I think, required of us generally, like in a world that needs healing. Um, but I don't. So in that way, I don't think Steubenville is special. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's very special to me. Uh,
Well, I really admire what you guys are doing out there, and to take the risk that's involved in that. It really is, you know, encouraging for the rest of us who sometimes despair at the perhaps maybe inevitability that you feel is upon us. So,
well, I'd say it's no risk once you realize that the place chooses you, right? So
hmm,
we have a understandable tendency to think of ourselves as apart from the world and then choosing of it what we shall do. I shall do
hmm,
this. I shall do that. I shall become this. And that's the way that a technocratic society describes its own people is sort of as sort of limitless potential, free without being bound to time, place, or person, and then who act out of that kind of limitlessness into some kind of gamble, and then hopefully it works out.
hmm,
But I think the other possibility of life is that you're more listening for what's required in your immediate situation. So it wasn't like out of a bunch of options, a bunch of people said Steubenville's the option. It was more like yeah, people hearing a certain call in a place, trying to meet it.
hmm,
And once that shifts and you kind of think of a place as choosing you as opposed to you choosing a place, you're, I find you're much more capable of dealing with its disappointments and frustrations, because
hmm,
instead of life being a sort of narrative in which you're the hero and therefore all of the disappointments are on you and your choice and you screwed up and you made some sort of cosmic mistake. Instead of that, they become intrinsic to the call. Like you were called to this suffering, you were called to this disappointment, you were called to this failure, and to growth in and through it. I think it's such a fundamental um, shift, counter to everything that AI seems to be promising, which is um, the kind of access to a great potential of power for any end that you choose, to instead kind of reverse that whole logic and say that your powers, your gifts that you're given are for the sake of an adventure and a destiny that's in the world there for you. So yeah,
well,
yeah, I
no, no, that's. I mean, that's a. I mean, we're this endeavor that Andrew and I are working on. It's grounded in hope, but not hope in the world, but that kind of theological the theological virtue of hope, which as Pope Benedict elaborates, it has to be grounded in prayer and suffering. I mean, it almost kind of equates the two. And
sure.
so to suffer to be rooted in a place, it seems that that yeah, I really admire what you guys are doing. So Mark, I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
just if you're any like I sometimes wonder if anybody you wonder who the people are reading things. I'm one of your, I'm reading a lot of the stuff, listening to the podcast coming out,
Sure.
and I really appreciate it. So it's great for all the world, and I know Andrew also is a listener, and so many other people that are part of our endeavors. So it's nice to connect with you. I guess via Zoom, but hopefully
Sure.
someday we can connect again at the maybe the grocery store or even again at the Chesterton cigar shop.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I'll
That'd be
have
great.
to, yeah, I'll have to bring an extra pair of clothes or, or burn them immediately after. So
Sure.
thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Uh, Keep up the good work, and often with new polity, we find that what we're really doing is just trying to affirm people in their most immediate and early reactions and suspicions about the world. Like there was a guy who was like thanking he was thanking me very profusely because he quit his job that he hated and he started a job he really likes. Apparently on the basis of me saying something in particular. And I was like, dude, you not doing something you don't want to do and doing something you do want to do is you. Like that's you. You did that. And we just live in a world in which like doing what seems very obviously good becomes very tortured. AI is very
Hmm.
similar. It's like your first reaction is always, "That's weird. It seems like I'm being scammed," um, and then you involve yourself in a sort of like uh, torturous route by which you say, "But it's inevitable. But I have to. But it's the future." Yada yada yada. So often, new polity, even though it can seem maybe a little highfalutin, is just trying to say, "No, no, that first response was actually the right one."
Yeah,
So
no, it's amazing how like how much we torture ourselves to see the world in a certain light. But yeah, it's like, the intuitions of a child, or that first gut reactions often.
yeah,
Um,
very often.
that's right. So, well,
Well,
thank
thanks
you,
for
Mark.
having me. Yeah, thanks for having me
Yeah,
on. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah, we hope to have you again with Andrew sometime. Or I know Jacob, your mom, we're connected with Jacob as well. So,
awesome.
until next time, thank you,
All
Mark.
right. Thank you.